Hello, everyone. Hi, Marcos. Hi, Ricardo. So
Hi, Philipp.
we're just
Hello,
waiting a couple more minutes. It's still a bit early, so we're letting people in. Still waiting a couple of minutes, and then we will get started with the evening. So
cool.
Yeah, no worries. I just didn't want to be late, so
perfect.
better be here. How are you doing, Marcos? Are you from Brazil or Portugal?
I'm from Brazil, actually. I'm good in you, Ricardo.
Também sou brasileiro.
Bom ouvir.
Already making the connections.
I didn't catch this in the last call.
Asking myself the same because of your name. Sounds very Brazilian, but I was like, might be Spain or Portugal.
Nice. Where are you from in Brazil?
I'm actually from Brasilia, but I was living in São Paulo for more than 10 years.
Nice. Are you in São Paulo now or in?
No, I'm Munich.
Munich, us. I'm in Fürstenfeldbruck.
So we're all pretty close then.
Yeah. Well, I live in Berlin, but I'm here visiting, so
Nice.
really
Awesome.
close.
To all the audience that already is joining us, please feel free to write in the chat where you guys are from and where you're joining us from today. Very excited, very keen to get to know that. Cool. Yeah, we're just waiting for the last speakers to join as well. I'm giving it like 3-4 more minutes. So we have some Italians, some people from the UK, from the States. So I guess for some, it's like for us, it's the day is ending. For some, the day is just starting. It's Sweden, Zagreb, a very nice wide mix and variety of listeners already joining us. So I hope you guys are well prepared. I'm gonna share some cool insights with the audience today. I'm really excited myself what we're gonna hear today and what we're gonna bring to the table. Nina joined us as well.
I'm actually curious to learn because there is so many specialists on the topic here that I'm with my notes here, like taking notes for myself.
Perfect.
I hope someone knows what they're talking about. That would be super helpful.
Given that it's such a fresh and new topic, right, I think it will be very, very interesting. And I think that's also why we chose this format. But I will introduce it to the audience and in a couple of minutes as well. Just letting like 3 more minutes go by. We're still waiting for Saki to join the panel. And Beth just joined us right now. So I think we're almost complete then. Hi, Beth.
Hi, thanks. Well, sorry for his password and then ended up just creating a new account very quickly. I definitely at the
no worries at all.
I set up a new VPN and it's overriding my passwords in certain places. So
nice to have you in now. Hi Nina. Hi Saki.
Hi everyone.
Hi everyone.
I also had some issues, but I'm in. I hope you can all hear me.
Awesome.
Hey everyone.
Perfect. So yes, I don't want to hold it on and hold it out for any longer. I think we should just get started. The room is filling up. You can see people already writing us where they're joining from. I think we have a wide crowd and wide variety of people already joining us from different parts of the world. Really happy to have you all in today. It's really, really exciting. It's such a cool topic, and I can't wait to hear lots of insights of your daily work with like how you're incorporating AI, what you think of AI, what your ethical takes are on it. And so I'm quickly going to introduce today's format to the audience. So you won't be listening to any, I would say, boring or dull presentations today. What we believe in, what we really think is of most value to everyone in this round is bringing in a bunch of experts on different topics, a bunch of heavyweights in the design industry, which I guess all of you guys and the girls are in this round, and discussing the topic of future of design and future of AI in design. And my name is Philipp. I will be hosting you throughout the day or the night or lunch break, wherever you're joining from. My background is also in digital design. I'm the co-founder of a digital design and development agency in Munich and Spain called MVST. We're basically building digital products day in and day night, obviously having a lot of touch points with newest technologies and trying out newest things every now and then. And we are today accompanied by a really, really awesome panel of real design heavyweights. If you don't mind, I would quickly introduce you to the crowd and to the people. I would start off with Ricardo. He is, as said, a heavyweight in the product design industry, more than a decade of experience building, designing, and crafting digital experiences. He's worked at Meta's Horizon Workrooms, so deep knowledge of like VR and AR applications. I think that's a topic where we most yet have little knowledge of, but something that is very, very excited as AI can play a big part there. And I'm very keen to hear from Ricardo and his take on how they are incorporating AI in the work. So everyone give Ricardo a warm welcome and a big round of applause already, even if it's silent. Awesome. Next up, we have Beth, who is joining us. Beth is, again, like a very design heavyweight with a lot of experience. She has basically lived all across the world: San Francisco, Los Angeles, London, Hamburg. She's called all of these places home. She's currently the director of product design at Doodle. I think, most of you guys out there in the crowd will be familiar with that. Very, very great to have you, Beth. I'm very curious about your experiences with AI and how you are incorporating that in your day-to-day work. Give also Beth a warm welcome into the round. Thank you for joining us. I know you're all very busy and have very busy schedules, so I really, really appreciate that. Next up, we have Marcos, currently product design manager at Freeletics. I guess, everyone who's interested in sports and fitness kind of has heard of the application already. So also, Marcos is an absolute heavyweight with more than 15 years of experience in shipping digital products, digital designs, and has worked at McKinsey, Airbnb before that. So also bringing a lot of experience and knowledge to the table. Again, warm welcome to Marcos. Also, thank you very much for joining us today. Then, in my screen at least, down at the bottom with the nice picture in the background is Saki. Saki already joined us in a couple of previous panel talks. Saki previously co-founded Zero to Design, which was voted top 20 design agencies in London. He is basically a multidisciplinary designer as well, with more than 8 years of experience in leading, designing, and helping startups grow and scale in different areas. He currently launched a pretty sick new newsletter. I'm sure Saki will post it later on in the chat. He is also exploring the fields of AI in various fields in that newsletter. So pretty excited about that and happy to have you again, Saki. Awesome, thank you. And then almost last but not least, so Nina. Also, Nina is a multidisciplinary designer. She has been a design lead for almost a decade, spending on building design applications, brands, complex platform, and she has been fostering the Berlin Design Ops community and has been growing that along. So also a very heavyweight, especially when it comes to design operations. Also very curious to get that take into the panel today and see how artificial intelligence can help you there and can bring that forward for everyone. So also warm welcome, Nina. Thank you very much for joining us. And now last but not least, we have Joshua joining us. Joshua is actually a homegrown talent, I would call him. He's working with me in the design team at MVST. He has been working as a designer also a bit across the globe. He's been working in the USA for a startup. He's been working in Germany, and he's currently design manager at MVST, exploring the ways for our design team on how to utilize AI and the likes of ChatGPT and other tools in this day-to-day doing. Everyone, that will be your panel for today. We're gonna touch or we wanna going to discuss 5 overall topics. The first thing that I would really like to discuss with every one of you is just a general overview. I would like for everyone to share a bit the experiences that they have made with AI, with like all of these news popping up, all of these new tools popping up left and right. After that, we might want to dive a bit deeper into certain applications that you have maybe more experience with, talking about some ethical considerations, like while using AI, also like what it will do to the workforce, how it will impact our roles, and like also like junior designers joining into this system and into the field. Obviously, opportunities and challenges is quite interesting, like especially in the adoption rates. Also challenges or opportunities on what we see in the future, like what are the tools that we are going to design. I think Ricardo is going to be a big take on that with VR, AR. I think Apple is about to launch maybe some glasses, some VR or AR glasses, hopefully sometime, which might get a bit more broader market then. And then obviously just a broad outlook on the future of that specific topic. While we are starting, I'm going to open the Q&A panel here in the tool. So after we conduct or conclude the panel discussion, we will direct this question to whoever you want them answered. So feel free to jump onto these questions and write everything that you would like to know from the panel into the tool so we can gather them and get them afterwards. So monologue over. I don't want to bother you any longer, so I would say let's absolutely dive into it. I would just direct the word, maybe you directly towards the left to my side. That's Marcus. Marcus, why don't you like get us a bit started into the topic? Like, what are tools? How are you currently utilizing? Are you utilizing it at all in your day-to-day doing? Are you using certain AI tools? Maybe to get the topic rolling and started.
Thank you. It's a huge responsibility to start, but what I can say, journey. We tested once to bring it to the application. We are trying to, we have these covers that is like the cover of the workout for the user. And today we have photos presenting different journeys that the user can do in the app. And we study if we could like create something personalized for the user that was unique based on their own data. But at the point that we tested, the result was not super hard to have consistency and to actually control the style of the results. So we didn't move forward with this idea. But we also have been using a lot on our process, on our design process. For example, research or even like to start to explore some ideas. We use the times to help us like create, for example, I don't know, like other day we were doing a video to present a feature that we create, and was kind of something that we need to sell, was an internal hackathon, and we need to sell the feature that we're working on, and we use ChatGPT to create like the script, the video, and we use it like the structure that was generated there initially, but we change it, but we're super good to help us to do things we are not like specialized in doing, but doing in a more fast way and like trying more ourselves. I would say I would put those stories. So maybe Mid-Journey and ChatGPT, but we also have been testing some of the tools to generate different variations of screen. But this, for me right now, I don't feel like it's in a level, to be honest.
Yeah.
So we try it, but
I would like to touch back on that at a later time as well, on these specific UI tools. But the takeaway is, so what you're definitely doing is, instead of like always going to or directly going to someone external, is like trying more yourself, trying to create a storyline for videos, using ChatGPT in order to structure certain things and like get more knowledgeable in a field. And also, as you just mentioned, like within the application, trying to use AI in order to predict a couple of features and functionalities. Beth, maybe directing into your direction a bit, like, I don't know how much you're allowed to share, but at Doodle as well. What are plans in the product? What are, like, how are you utilizing it within your design team at Doodle, which obviously is a big one?
Yeah, so inside of the product itself, we're still in really early exploration mode of like, what is the purpose and why should we use it? You know, like, of course we could, everybody could plug it in anywhere, but from my years of experience, I started in the 90s and I have just as you can create a blinking GIF, it doesn't mean you should, right? And so within the product, we're really still in the researching as like, how can we utilize this to connect two different people together the best way. But it's early research phase on how this could work. But what we're doing more is how do we streamline our workflow a bit. And again, I've been exploring different tools just on an exploration point. ChatGPT is probably the one that we use the most, probably the one most people use. And I'll say kind of where this journey started was a couple of months ago. We were doing an Amazon work backwards, start with the press release on some upcoming things. And we broke into groups of 2 and the CPO was in the room and she goes, okay, I don't have a group. How about I do it on my own? And she went and she did Chat GPT and her, and we're just playing around with ideas of how would we format this. And it took us humans, long time. And it took her like 10 minutes and she was done. What was interesting is when we started looking at it, ours was more human, and so we then have started looking at this where I would most, and we're not really officially allowed to. So I use my personal computer next to me because then I'm not breaching any security elements of the company right now. We use it for the design system. We're refurbishing and building out our design system, and there's nothing more time consuming than researching how do I say this component should work. And so whenever we can find something that should be standard, we use it, and we just use it as a and then we use it for refining our research questions to say like, hey, how do I make sure I'm not asking a leading question with this? And then it starts helping us refine this much faster.
Very, very interesting. So again, like also in the product side of things, like very early, very experimental, but like utilizing a lot into like basically design operations is how I would frame it a bit more. Maybe a perfect handover also to you in your direction, Nina. I think as you have been also a leading figure in like design operations in Berlin. I'm also very curious how that is evolving and opening up certain possibilities in design system, in streamlining work across like different departments with design systems.
So yeah, I actually wanted to build on top what Beth just said, because my expertise is design systems. And in my last company, I led a design system team consisting of designers and engineers, but also I set up foundations myself in a very hands-on approach. So I was also reflecting how much time, literally weeks, I spent writing documentation because it had to be done. I had no other choice. I had no content writer by my side. I had no resources to hire one, and I had to set standards, which is touching upon design ops, so I can enable others how to work with the design system, but also set an example, how can we write further design guidelines so others can do it as well. So I tried to reframe the task I had, let's say 2-3 years ago, and run few commands on ChatGPT. And I basically arrived to the conclusion that I had weeks, if not months, of redundancy. So a lot of work that I did could be simply fixed within a week, or fine-tuning and training the model using existing design system documentation from different open source design systems that I basically used to train myself how to write documentation. And I could just have it done by an algorithm. So there is a lot of work that we can automate that is mundane, that is repetitive, boring, or simply that is, not our core task. So designers could rather focus on solving meaningful problems, doing research, figuring out what is really relevant in the context of their product, instead of doing these things that could be simply removed.
Yeah.
So in the context of design operations, also similar, it's about defining how we work together and how can we enable designers. So basically service design for design teams. So we can use, for instance, ChatGPT to create designer onboarding roadmaps, but also we could use different open source tools. Recently, I've seen, actually, so it's not an open source, it's more like a tool that you can experiment with a different paid model. It's called, I believe it's called Software. I will drop a link. Basically, you can build your own product or company culture knowledge base. So instead of spending hours in meetings to onboard a new hire on how you do design, how you do the research, all different things that are relevant in your company, you can just streamline all of that into internal knowledge base. So person can write a command and have someone maybe guide them through it, and they can have all the answers at any given moment.
Nice. So you see a lot of potential basically in the work that you have been doing, going into design systems, documentation, and the likes. I think that's something that, Joshua, correct me, but also on our end within the company that we have seen that is very useful and can help and reduce a lot of complexity. I like to touch and get back there on a couple of things later on. I think we're all like a bit in the realms of ChatGPT, maybe a bit of mid-journey, I think, from a tooling perspective. I think that's what we're about. I think Marcus already explored some of the UI alternatives, which I'm keen. I'm keen, Ricardo, you have been working with VR and AR. Obviously, there's a lot of like immersive and sceneries and things that can and need to be created. I think there's a lot going on in that direction as well. So very keen to hear from your side as well, how you have been or how far you have been stretching AI to use it while you developing different kind of experiences for users.
Yeah, first of all, I was working at Meta until 3 months ago. I did leave to join an AR startup, so it's actually very relevant.
Yeah, that's a good. Sorry, I missed that. But that's
Okay.
a perfect opportunity into that direction.
Yeah, no, I actually have a few funny stories there. So I joined a startup that was working on data visualization, and they're trying to build this new Tableau. Tableau is this gold standard for data visualization, pretty old, pretty useful, but built in maybe 10 years ago. So they're trying to build something simpler. But then in the meantime, so when I joined, I didn't know SQL, and SQL was a big part of data visualization. How do you run queries? I hadn't done anything with SQL specifically. So I started to use ChatGPT to learn about it. So I got a book and began to train to write queries myself. But very quickly, I realized that learning a new knowledge, especially programming queries alone, was really not that useful. Rather, like thinking and reasoning about how I write these queries, what kinds of ways I should be structuring data was actually more useful. And so GPT began to write the queries for me, and I began to do my data visualization experiments. That was quite helpful. And also the product was experimenting new things. The product it's a work in progress that has been going on for 2 years. But funnily enough, since January, everyone in the company was really fearful of how AI can disrupt even the process of visualizing data, because no one wants to write SQL queries, right? It's very easy to imagine that everyone that wants to explore data, especially in a product design context, wouldn't want to sit down and write, or even create a ticket for a data analyst to explore this data. So we began to explore this SQL agent, which basically does it. You can ask a human human formulated question about the data, and it searches for the data that you already have in your organization. So there could be plenty of data sets, qualitative and quantitative, and it will translate what your quest is into a particular query. It's going to run the query, it's going to analyze the data and come back to you with human responses. It's still not working perfectly, but comparing that experience to the canvas that we had, which forced you to write these queries and forced you to solve these problems, it was really easy to see that very soon, I think a lot of these products that have been designed with the previous paradigm that forced you to learn so many things are probably not going to survive, in the sense that I think the access to data and access to do things that were quite difficult just a few months ago are probably going to go away. So yeah, so we began to change the product. We're still rethinking how do we make data visualization much more human friendly, and how do we interact with data in a very much more open way than it happened before. So I hope that was helpful, but sort of took a detour, maybe not as expected as you originally had it.
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? I think we all have our different experiences, and I've been utilizing it different, and maybe even different than people are expecting. So my take on it was like, okay, maybe in VR, like creating really virtual realities, creating immersive like sceneries and things could be something where like there's a lot of tools currently out there to do that and utilize that. You're now coming way more from a data point perspective, which I find super interesting, which I have been using myself, like outside of the design stuff as well, as like visualizing data and using it to transform data. I think is like a prime use case as well. But also maybe Josh, into your direction, into the whole part about data, but not in the sense of data, but more like user research. What's your take on it? How have you been utilizing it within the company?
So yeah, I mean, from our side, we've been using it a lot on the start of the product, basically. Like when we start a project, we've been trying to generate a lot of ideas, obviously with AI, but going further into the project, we've seen a lot that, as also Beth, you mentioned, the tools are not super far in that sense of that you can really rely on them. Like it generates you something, but it also generates you a lot of shit, but it sounds right. So that's the problem with it sometimes. And what we've been very successful with is basically trying to generate as many ideas as possible in multiple contexts in the beginning, and then using this output with our like combined with our knowledge about the client, about the project in general, to pick the best, and then basically dance down on that and refine that idea. But yeah, also in the user research perspective, back to your question, Philipp, there's of course a lot of data that AI can just sum up very quickly in ways we can't really see. So, for example, ChatGPT, like what I've done a couple of times, but unfortunately it doesn't work for every page, can read reviews from pages that you actually paste in there. So what we've done for a couple of clients was just like, hey, what are people actually saying about that, like in 1,000 reviews or whatever, and that kind of gives you a good feeling about something, and then you have to still go the extra mile yourself to actually make that also work, that knowledge. But in the end, it's a super nice start, which just gives you another perspective at the very beginning of the project. I think that's a special part, because you have your workflows and so on, and they're always the same, right? With artificial intelligence, you sometimes get a couple of breakthroughs where you wouldn't have thought that you could also do it like this, or that this competitor is out there. Like that's also another source we use it for, like competitive research. It's perfect. You can just say like, hey, look for something where you have like a search for, I don't know, bicycles, and then basically it just gives you a whole list from stuff where you could have spent also easily 2 or 3 hours just looking for that. So that's basically how we use it at the moment.
Absolutely, I think especially the beginning of the project, right, where you need a broad and variety of ideas coming into your system and like opening and broadening the view instead of like sticking to your bubble or something. That is quite interesting. Saki, I think you have been exploring that one right away in your latest newsletter as well, where you have been trying to get some takes and ideas on it. What is your take? How have you been utilizing? Obviously, I guess if you heard now, more like 5 or 6 times it's ChatGPT as the most common tool currently in this space. But how have you been utilizing it?
Yeah, I've been testing out, testing its limits, seeing what it can do, what it can't do. And yeah, what Josh has said there, and what you've just mentioned about like being divergent, when you want lots of different options, it is super powerful for that, much faster than any one of us could ever like accomplish that. So for anything divergent, definitely is a great starting point. And yeah, the recent post I mentioned was around creating options. One of the things I found is when you give it a certain framework, like I need X variable with Y need in Z style, and then give it like an example, it can spin out lots and lots. And then you can go through kind of like this iterative process with it to try to refine that into more relevant ideas. And it gets to a pretty good level. How I describe it is, if you take like a forklift analogy, it's the lifter, but it's not the mover. So rather than like actually carrying it onto your like truck or whatever, it can lift it up for you, but you still got to drive that thing to whatever direction you want to go into. So I think it's like super powerful to like get you up to a certain level, and then you got to like take it into a certain direction. It's very good for that. And eventually, I think our roles will just adapt. I know there's a lot of chatter about, oh, will AI take my job? Will we die here? I think you're always going to get that with new technologies, right? And then when you actually apply it, you're like, it's just not quite there, or it doesn't have, because for it to work, it needs to have context. So it requires you to provide all the context. Now, are you going to go through and provide every little bit of context that you know? That's going to take ages. And if you do that, something will probably change. So it's going to constantly need to be refreshed. So the like full automation part is probably still a way away, but it definitely gives you so much power to like guide it into a certain direction. And I've just been trying to see what parts of the design process it can guide. One is definitely around options, and that could be options for literally anything. I've done it for content types. I've done it for presenting certain like layouts of websites, different like menus or footer items. Even done it for like books in my personal life, like what kind of books I should read based on XYZ thing that I like. So incredible at presenting new options in the way that you would previously have to do it with Google. Search filter yourself, it can just like spew it out for you in like a really succinct way.
Nice. Yeah, I would add it's great for a starting point, especially if you feel blocked as a designer. Sometimes we are facing this situation where we just don't know where to start, we are procrastinating, and we need a little gentle push. So in that way, it's really great. Also, it's often hard to design without a context or without certain assets. And the biggest problem I find, even if I am designing myself, is the context switching. So I'm in Figma, and then I have to open Google, and then I get distracted easily, and then I see a notification on Slack and so on. So if we keep all our tools in the same frame, for instance, if we are using Figma and a certain plugin that generates text, that can translate the text, they can work on the text, that can generate some generic visual just to have something to get going, that's already saving, I would say, minimum 20% of your time here.
Yeah. No, I can totally agree. I think what is really interesting is one common pattern now that we have heard around is that AI is quite useful in certain parts, but it's not yet far enough in another parts. So I would be very curious, because obviously we are in the design field, right? Like we have multidisciplinaries that we need to take care of and that we need to be somewhat good at, like from user research, from conceptualization throughout. And I think one of the questions that is always dangling up in my head is, what about UI? Like, when will there be something, or is there something? Have you tried something that actually generated a nice, compelling, and attractive UI? Because give or take, look at the tools. The tools getting more and more similar in a lot of things, in a lot of ways. What's your experience there? Like, I will not direct it because I don't know if anyone has had some good experiences with. I think, Marcus, you mentioned something that you tried to play around with it, but super curious about that.
Yeah, I tried, but was not that much. I try more in a concept level, and what I felt is that it's good to like get a glimpse on how the style will look and like have an idea, collect ideas that you can use, but a way to use it that can generate like reliable design that we can actually use. It's more like to get inspiration and like try different styles based on something that you already have. This is like a really good, but like to with floor or something like this, I didn't found anything that can design on this level.
Yeah, I actually I found the plugin lately on Figma. Colleague at the client is really into AI, and me too. So we always chat, and they just sent me this plugin for Figma lately. Forgot the name now, but I can look it up later. However, it's still so crazily underdeveloped. Like, I think we're right now at the moment where it will develop super fast. Like, they're also, I think, really good AIs in the making, which are just closed betas, and there's no way to get in. Like, the waiting list is too long. But the plugin I used was really like underperforming in a different way, because literally, like, the functionality itself, it was not bad, and I think they could have done it better in a simple way, because they say, okay, like, you give us the name of the screen that you want to build and a couple of features that you want to have on that screen. So actually, it's not that hard to build, right? You basically have repeating patterns, and you can just add some text. However, I was trying to build some profile. I just said, okay, give me a profile, and then use like account settings and the help page to populate that. In the end, it was like you would roll the dice, and it would just like give you whatever components it would randomly generate and put it on there. Like, there were reviews on there. There was a huge blog card, which, what does a blog do in a profile? So yeah, I think right now, at least, I don't know if you had better plugins yet, but for me, I really tried to find some, and couldn't, unfortunately, yet.
Yeah, I mean, I am looking at this on how do I get my team to save time. So I'm always exploring different new tools, different plugins. This week I was playing with the cloud version of UIZard, which it looks really powerful and exciting, but it's not 100% there yet. So there are some really great things where you can do your hand sketched wireframes and then turn them into components that you can start building your wireframes online. They also have the ability to just take already existing patterns and templates or upload an existing product and build it. But what I see from this is it's like, okay, now everything is going to be the pattern the same, which is what the strength of AI is finding patterns. But what it's lacking is now, how do I make something new and innovative and creative? And that's where we have to come in as humans. And it's even the same with like the Chat GPT. It's whatever you get out of it is what you're putting into it. So like when I had to write my bio, I'm not as full of myself as the bio is, but I kept feeding things into the Chat GPT to say like, how would you say this? How would you say this? And then I was like, all right, that works. So, this is kind of the way that we have to start looking at how do we add that human creative element back, and the tools aren't quite there yet. And part of this is there are so many coming so fast that we have to weed through the mess and find what's going to work.
Yeah. What do you think, like, the tools are not there yet? What about, like, what are we looking at? Like, what is the future of these applications, and where do you see them developing towards? Like, do you think they will be able to deliver us with the UI that we need at some point? Do you think like UI part will something that will stick to us as designers for a very, very long time still until they can catch up there? What is your take on that?
I think we've got a couple years. I mean, I think we've got a couple years before we really start seeing true power of this and it becomes part of the commonplace of our working life. But where I see this, you know, when you look at it across other industries, I mean, AI is not new, right? It's been in the medical industry. New vaccines are coming out because of the power of AI. Cancers are being found because of the power of AI. We're just now starting to see it of how do we start using it to build in these regular lives. And I think it'll take a couple of years, but I think it will help us be faster. It's like designers of the 50s were using pencils. When I came onto the scene, I was using like Photoshop. You know, how many tools have progressed till we're at Figma, which is much easier and faster. And now, I mean, we do have things like Canva when anyone can go in and be like, I'm going to create a logo. Does that using Canva make that a person a designer? You know, that I think our roles of designers with our design education has to become more of this facilitator, educator, guide.
Yeah, I think like what we're gonna see relatively fast is something like you said, Beth, that you kind of like have it as a co-pilot. And for example, like something easy to build would be an Figma plugin for like just checking your screens for accessibility, like all of your screens at once. Just saying like, hey, this is what's wrong. This is how you could improve it based on what I've learned so far. And I think like it always is like such a complex topic, but there's also very, very easy tools that you could build out of it. And I think those will come sooner. And then of course, like in a couple of years, that's gonna be insane probably, but I hope at least that we will see something sooner as well.
I think on this note, I think Joshua and Beth touched on this topic of the granular controls and how do you interact with it, and the fact that some things it just can't be automated. But I do see, I think the main paradigm for AI was the black box paradigm, which meant that you give something, you get something out. You don't really know why you got it. But I think language models really made a breakthrough in this type of interface, because even when you're asking GPT, you can also ask for explain its reasoning, and it will give you something. I'm giving you this because I'm making these connections. So that's already quite a leap forward in terms of having interfaces to deal with complexity and a different level of intelligence. But I do feel like when it comes to design, we're still dealing with black boxes, right? Like if you look at Midjourney, the idea of putting a prompt and expecting and being excited about what's going to come out, that's really nice if you're not a designer. But if you're creating a lot of brand assets, or if you're trying to come up with a very high level of thinking about your craft, you have to start using at least the hybrids when you mix two images together, where you have some more control. But so I think the idea of control, it's going to start to come out. I don't think we're there yet in terms of interfaces. So it gets really meta, because to have AI helping designers, we also need designers to help AI. So I think we're not there yet in terms of, there are a lot of new startups coming to the market right now. But I think most of the things that I'm seeing are startups trying to give easy access in this Canvas style that Beth mentioned, where maybe it is aimed at people that wouldn't be able to do this otherwise. They don't have the skills to do that. But the problem with that is that it's all data sets, right? It's always reflecting on things that existed. So you kind of see the dribblization of the world coming back through AI. And I think I think we're going to have tools that would allow us to express more, to instruct, to create variations, so we can have more granular control. But yeah, maybe a couple of years, months, hard to tell.
No, it's super interesting. I think like kind of the mix. Onina, go ahead. You had a take on that as well.
Oh, everything was said so wisely. I would just add here that new solutions will be definitely part of our existing workflows. Maybe we won't notice them as a separate tool. They will be somewhat embedded. And I would like to point out to the recent essay published by Jacob Nielsen, in which he elaborated on potentially third paradigm we reached, first time for the 60 years, which is basically intent-based outcome specification. So before we would tell what we want to do, like in Photoshop, draw a rectangle, so we would have to draw it ourselves. And right now, we describe the outcome that we want to do. Draw a rectangle that has a McDonald's sign on it in a sunset and so on. and then we receive a image. But as Ricardo said, this is very far from what we actually wanted, because the logic is not as intuitive. It still cannot read our thoughts, yet we expect them to imagine what we thought, not what we specified. So we are still far from them, and this is what sets us apart. We would never, I mean, I don't think we will in a short time be able to replace by AI, because they cannot replace our cognitive process, the intricacies of what make us decide left or right. All these things that we use to train our ability as a designer, by cracking complex problems, by looking at color palettes, by observing the intricate differences between different typefaces. Those are all such a subtle details that you cannot just get by defining a command. You can get a starting point, but then you need to fine-tune yourself much further.
No, absolutely agree with that. And I think it's very interesting. I think the general take on it is we're definitely not there yet, right? Like it will enhance and solve certain parts of it in the future, but like we are not there yet. I think maybe twisting the take or the view angle that we're currently having is like, how can AI help us as designer? It's like also a bit more into the direction of like, how do we think AI will be implemented in the tools that we are actually designing, and how are we going to design for that, and how is it going to impact the user journeys within these tools? I think that is a whole other area as well, which we could just talk an hour about it, but I really like to get, like, I mean, with this expert panel, I really like to get a glimpse of your thinking, of your thought processes behind it. How do you design an AI tool? Like, how do you design for it? How do you come up with these predictions? How do you make good and like ethical, which will be a part I would like to touch a couple minutes later on as well. Like, how do you design ethical features with AI? Whoever wants to take the lead here, whoever has some and cool ideas from their products or from previous products, I'd like you to give you the chance here to jump in.
I don't have the answer, but I do say that it's really interesting that the interface for these tools right now seems to be text, which seems to be very going back into like the old nerds in the 80s with their first personal computers. And what did we learn from the UI that we see now, where we want to see images, is a lot of us need to touch things. And so I think the tools themselves need to start evolving. And so designers need to build these tools. I think Ricardo said this. But
I
like
was about to point that in his direction.
You know,
it's like a curveball into the
right?
artificial intelligence and like AR direction.
Yeah. So I don't know what they will be. I can see multiple uses across the board on how we can start using the tools that we have right now. Like, I think, you know, image cleanup, right? Like, how quick to clean up an image. When I was starting out a designer working in e-commerce, where you had catalogs of stuff and you'd spend hours scrubbing through to get a shadow off of something, you know. But the tools themselves, I think, really need to start evolving beyond that text input. I think that's actually a hurdle for people to start using Midjourney, is that, oh, I've got to start typing things. I don't know how to start.
Ricardo, how do you think like about these augmented realities? Like, how can AI make an impact there? Like, how could it help you developing, designing tools like that actually bring something forward to the user in that augmented reality, in like what they're doing with their lenses on? Like, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think it is actually quite similar to engineering. I think maybe the XR stuff that's happening now, it's maybe one of the most challenging. I'm not like overselling what I was doing. I was barely catching up, but it's really one of the most challenging things that I've ever worked on, because you're dealing a lot with math. You're dealing with Unity, which doesn't really help. You're dealing with shaders. You're dealing with a lot of complex ideas. Interfaces are in space. As you move your headset, then you have to keep the position of the thing. And will it have shadow? Will it face you? Will it not? What will it happen when you walk away from it? When you come back, will it be there? And so there are a lot of different questions, but I think even just being able to access the technology. So again, I'm going to go back to Copilot and even ChatGPT to help you write functions, to help you prototype, help you make sense of this, help you also navigate a wide range of papers and knowledge that is being produced now that is, at least for me, was quite hard to access. I wasn't using ChatGPT then, but I have made my own ChatGPT recipes to parse out PDFs, to basically summarize 10 academic papers into a few bits and pieces that I can use for making sense of this. So I think when it comes to XR, I think the tool set is still really immature, and it's really hard to speculate. If you just just building a quick prototype that when you're designing 2D, you can do it in half a day in Figma or Framer, using any other tool in VR and XR, it will take you maybe a week or 2 weeks with maybe 2 engineers. So that's maybe the challenge there. But I think the Copilot and ChatGPT do already a great job at providing you quick functions that you can copy and paste and see if they run. But I think to your other question about how interfaces will change and what are the opportunities there for how do we develop these new interfaces, I think there's maybe a spectrum of automation I've been thinking a lot about. So automation, I think Nina mentioned that some tasks you really don't want to do because they're boring. You want to be doing something more fun. And I think a lot of people are on this level. Say, like, there's this company called Perplexity, where you can instead of just asking a question, you can give a goal, and it will try to find a way to achieve this goal for you. So there's some work being done on AI agents, which is taking LLMs to the next level, where they're reflecting on the output, and they're basically trying to, so you just give it a goal, and it will try to describe the task for itself. It will try to plan the next task. It will try to evaluate if the task it did matched your goal and success criteria. But I think that only works if people are trying to delegate things, if they don't want to do that. But if you're trying to actually get in the weeds, if the task is really complex, I think exposing this complexity. So I think Saki was talking about this, where I don't know if this is right, but it seems like you're prompting engineering GPT. You're trying out different prompts and handling chaining different prompts together. I think interfaces that let us explore this complexity and visualize it and play with it, so that it becomes less of a non-deterministic output. So it's less of a magic. It's actually more of a thing that you can look at and you can change it and you can start to play around it. I think the more we can get to that, I think it's very to many things, to design to prototyping. But yeah, this is kind of how I see it. There's probably more, but these are that keep coming back.
No, I think it's very interesting. Like, I think there's yet to explore a whole world of fields of where you can make use of AI in the products. I mean, Saki, you have been a co-founder of an agency as well. You've been working with a lot of startups. I could just talk from my experience, clients, and I think there's a lot of, especially not in the tech world, there's a lot of AI buzzwords still going on. Yeah, we need to make that AI, but they don't really know what it means and what they want to do that. Saki, what was your experience with it? Have you seen some, or have you had the chance to implement some real AI use cases while you were supporting these startups in the past? And how was your take?
Yeah, it's early days. The thing is, you have to the implementations that we've seen and the products that we've seen are the people that move fast, right? Large corporations don't move fast. It doesn't happen. So they take more time. So I'm very interested to see what Figma do, by the way, because they are a large corporation now, but they've got all this data of how we use these products. And I would not be shocked to see a whole AI toolkit of here's a bunch of components you don't even need to build. We just know millions of users use this. Here you go pick it out. That kind of stuff is definitely coming. So all these people that you see are early stage or completely new companies, because they can run with it. They can create new ideas very, very quickly. Trying to inject it in, it's still the same stuff as we do in our process. Does it actually hit the user goal? Nowadays, it definitely probably can at a very surface level. Every company is probably going to have a landing page, and so vetting different user types and funneling them through. We've had Intercom for ages. There's little chat bots in the bottom right that you'll oftentimes see. This kind of stuff just gets enabled more and more by OpenAI being open source, for example. So I haven't had the chance to inject it anywhere, anytime. From a company perspective, I've obviously been doing it myself. And to be honest, I think if you have a bit of a technical taste or ability, you'll be able to engineer these things very easily together. So I've been looking at Bubble.io, which lets you create no code tools very easily. And they literally have, and anyone can do this. I'll share the link in the chat. Anyone can do this. They have a step-by-step guide of how to basically create like a plugin or like a pilot bot using OpenAI. So you can just like engineer whatever, because obviously and you'll understand this from an agency perspective, there's repeated tasks or repeated deliverables oftentimes that we have. And so if you're able to just inject certain inputs that you know are going to come up every time, it's like you don't even need to go now into the chat to type it in. You can just be like, hey, this is the input that I need, and then have that run as an engine. What you could create is your own little like cockpit. I would probably call it not a co-pilot, a cockpit, where you're like manning different things and being like, cool, this is what I need, this is the output that I need. That's become really powerful. But then, yeah, tying it into an actual product experience, does it actually still help? Does it actually still help the user achieve their goal? Is always going to be the question that you should be answering. Obviously, with it being buzzwords, people might just be like, hey, we need this for PR, and might have like a brand-led goal that comes in that you're going to have to like reluctantly take. But yeah, it's still got to hit the user goal, and it doesn't always have to. Like, it could be the case that AI is more powerful from how we create experiences rather than the experiences that we create. I can definitely see it potentially being more towards like in the background.
I think that's a very, very interesting take that we've been seeing and like also commenting on quite a bit and reading up about it. I think it's just like in the background, it's not that obvious to the user's eyes. I think it's like the people in the chat are curious about the platform that you were talking about. If you could bump them up the link,
yeah,
I think, and they will be super happy about that, to build some of their.
Bubble.io is the one. Let me look through my chats. I have this is actually inspired by, I don't know if any of you listen to this or watch it, but there's quite a popular podcast called My First Million with Sean Puri and Sam Parr, who are like newsletter dudes and startup dudes. And Sean has a session with one of his like very smart technical friends, which he just calls Cool Talk. And every other week, or I think it's every week for him, he'll just literally like hear all the cool ideas. So I went to like my friend who has a PhD in AI, and I was like, hey, let's do this ourselves. And one of the things he shared when we last spoke was this Bubble.io idea and like a blog post about how to create ChatGPT based concepts, basically. So yeah, let me find it in.
Awesome. Given that you're talking about like now creating your own kind of ChatGPT, like your own co-pilot, feeding it with your own data, that opens a whole other Pandora's box of like ethical data integrity, data sharing with these models. How have you and within your companies, how are you approaching it? I mean, Beth, you mentioned it at the beginning, you're using it on your private laptop on the side, I think currently, right? And there's like some restrictions to it. How do you see that currently, and how do you see that evolving as well throughout the next couple of years when it comes to feeding it with data of your company, feeding it with like, Nina, you mentioned it, right? Like external design system, documentation and things like that. Well, what's your take on that? Maybe Marcus, we start with you to kick off this ethical topic.
I just want to mention something about the last topic, actually. Something I would like to see would be something what we have on code. We have those kind of tests that is run automatic to test the quality. And we talk a lot about like how we're gonna see the AI building new flows and new solutions, but I'm actually curious to see how they will help us to analyze and run, because there is a lot of things that we can discover easily, like just by having AI testing and like seeing what is not working or what is the roads that are not like super clear for users, and help us on this level. Is something that I'm also super curious to see. I didn't saw much things on this area yet for user testing, but I think it's something that can be super useful and help us like save time on just on the creation part, but also on this other area where we can bring things quick by having some kind of automated test.
I would add something here. Google released a couple of years ago guidelines for designing AI products, which is very useful. It's publicly available, so you can check it out. And it all starts with the premise of matching user needs, which implies understanding the problem well enough with possibilities of AI. So AI is not necessarily always the best solution, but in more and more we develop this field further, we will see more implications. But we cannot remove this human capability of diving deep into the problem, talking with people and uncovering really deeply what needs to be solved. And only once we are clear on that, we can develop something meaningful. And then what I believe Joshua mentioned at the beginning, you said you were using ChatGPT to run competitor analysis and to check what is said in user review pages. And this is a great start because we can see what people said about similar products. So we can utilize that to, if you don't have a budget, for instance, if you don't have internal research capability, but still we cannot fully replace talking to real humans and seeing what they have to say.
Also, given that, like doing this research and having this data publicly available, making my curveball back to the initial topic about like how ethical usage of AI and like how we look at policy and these things and how you think they will develop in the future. Like, how are your companies handling it? How are you approaching it within your team as well? Would be super interesting to hear that. Beth, maybe you want to get started with it.
All right, sure. Yeah, I mean, as far as like the ethics of what we do inside of the company, I think like it also is global, right? Because in the EU, we have different rules and guidelines than we do in the US or perhaps in China or other places in the world. For example, as I said, I had struggled getting through my password with a new VPN. Google Bard was released last week, and I was like, I want to compare Bard to ChatGPT, so I had to set up a new VPN so I can access Bard, hitting a server in the US, because I want to see how they comply. And what's interesting when I think about ethics, and Nina, maybe you talked about like the source, where did this come from, right? Because the like ChatGPT dumps out a massive amount of information, but you don't know, is this true? This is just congregated information that has been pulled from everywhere. And what I really liked about playing around with Bard is it often gives you the source, and so then it's like, okay, it's this level in between Google and Bard, right? It's giving you, where did I compile this? But when I think about ethics as creators, then we have to start talking about equality, making sure, like recognition of what is human. I think ethics really come predominantly to living creatures. And I would say with that would be things that, I don't know, that they breathe, maybe, like they intake oxygen. Humans, the really important thing is AI is looking for patterns. So there's already all kinds of facial recognition and different things, and we've got to be very careful that we understand what a human is, making sure that someone in a wheelchair is still considered human just because you see wheels next to their body, or somebody of different race or background. So I think the ethics really have to be strong in making sure that all humans are created equally valuable when inside of the recognitions and direction we're going. And it's our responsibility as designers and people implementing these tools to make sure that is part of it.
Completely agree. Did you Giving on that topic of ethicality and like these tools also need to be ethical in the way how they deal with us as humans and what type of content they bring forward. Marcia in the chat just had a interesting thing. She wrote like Bart goes crazy sometimes. It just wrote like something completely and made something completely out of thin air. Did you have any like of these experiences as well while using that tools up until now, where you were saying like, oh, whoa, this is now going into a direction that is very critical or yeah, very dangerous in a way as well?
Personally, I have not, but I've seen other people talking about asking ChatGPT, which is more valuable, a human or AI, and then continuously putting in the prompt until it basically said they were equal, and one was not more significant than the other. So I was playing around with this week, and I was kind of putting Google, the Bard against ChatGPT, asking these questions, and I kind of ended up with the like, what is the difference? And what was nice was they all came out saying humans are creative. Humans have, this ability to think new ideas. And so I don't know. I think that also is what we can see is we have these tools. 100 years ago, it was the automobile replacing the horse and carriage. We progress, we get faster, but we still are the ones creating this. And so, I'm not so worried about the machines taking over. I'm worried about humans not behaving the best way for other humans.
It's a very interesting like analogy you did there, like with like 100 years ago we had the automobile replacing horse and carriage. At some point the government had to step in like these big innovation and inventions. Do you think that will be a case as well because of people not treating it or using it the way they should use? I don't know, Saki, what's your take on it, like on governmental regulation on AI in the future as well?
Yeah, I mean, Sam Altman already went in front of the Senate, right, or the House, I forget, recently. Yeah, I think the thing people were saying recently, or the chatter I had was like, if they didn't do it to social media, are they going to do it to this? Because you had all sorts of crazy scenarios come out of it. I don't know. There's definitely a lot of power that can be taken from automations. I don't really know what the limits are. Obviously, I haven't been testing it myself to see, what kind of crazy bad stuff can you do with this thing. But naturally, human beings, there will always be someone that's looking to take advantage in perhaps a more sinister way. So it may be the case that they have to when something gets uncovered, but this kind of stuff is normally not prevention, it's cure. So something will probably happen and they'll be like, no, this is kind of bad. We should probably not let this go any further. And then they'll probably step in. Right now, I don't think anything like that's happened. You could maybe argue that was the same thing with Facebook in 2016 and what happened with the political campaigns. And then you had like GDPR and that kind of stuff come in thereafter. Before that, I was like, yeah, sure. Everyone take everyone's data. No problem. You're all good. Cookies, doesn't matter. So maybe it will take something to get there. So far, obviously, most of the chatter is around all the cool stuff we can do to sell each other more stuff. So it's all very like capitalistic, very tech focused, which is good. But yeah, I think something will probably happen where you're like, okay, cool, this has to stop. So I see it more of a cure angle rather than a prevention. I really don't see that. I don't, especially like considering these companies, or OpenAI is from the US, so the US government is going to have to do something, and we all know what they're like in doing anything. So expecting them to like do this properly, yeah, I wouldn't be super optimistic, and I think it's going to be more of the cure than the prevention.
I would say we should be very careful. First of all, how do we train these models to be more ethical and inclusive? Because all these models are very biased at the moment, and as was said earlier, we don't know what was used to train them on. So we are in a danger that solutions we provide based on these models, based on utilizing AI, are suitable only for one overrepresented group, but neglecting everyone else. And second big consideration, privacy and knowing what happens with the input and also what happens with the output, who owns it and what happens further. And there was one great example of a portrait taking app. It was exploding on LinkedIn. Everyone was using it because it's so cool. It makes you look like being shot by a professional photographer, but actually it turns out that you waive your rights when you put it in. So whatever you put in, you don't own it anymore, and you don't know what they are going to do. And they're a small startup. They received, I think they received recently an investment. So basically it's the board of directors who will decide what happens with your data as a user. So those are all these implications we need to think of also as designers, if we will be taking part in creating such tools. So we don't compromise others, because in a way we are breaking what we promised to do when we took this profession upon us to create better experiences, to make other people's lives better, and so on.
It's all the doctors taking the oath to do no harm. Maybe we have to do something like that to manifest our ourselves, right?
No.
Speaking about no harm, Google had this tagline before. I think you talked about Google Bard and ChatGPT. Funny thing about Bard, some engineers left Google recently because they were using ChatGPT. There's a website called Share ChatGPT where people are sharing their ChatGPT conversations. So Bard, people at Google were using this website to train Bard. So it's really funny, like how there's a war of AI now. Like OpenAI also is really specific about other AI companies cannot use the API to train other LLMs. And I find that I think like the data, even for big AI companies, is already a big problem. And how do you, right now we don't have a lot of options. So say like, I think Apple also banned ChatGPT from employees using it because you're leaking so much data as you're posing these questions. We don't have a lot of alternatives to have local models yet. The technology is not there, but I do imagine that very soon we're going to have either companies being able to deploy them and being able to have their own version of it and being able to use it without. But I think, yeah, like clearly like $20 per person, that's how much you pay for GPT-4. It's barely paying the server costs, right? So there's a reason that GPT-4 came really, really quickly after GPT-3 was released. And the reason is because it got a lot of usage, right? It got like a huge adoption of 100 million people within a couple of months. So that's why they managed to release such a better model within a short amount of time. And I'm pretty sure they have something better already, because if you consider 100 million people using and giving feedback about what works and what doesn't, compared to the amount of training data that GPT-3 had, it's horrendous. So I think they're probably holding this back and until there's more regulation. So I don't really know where the regulation is going to go, but I think it is going to become more clear over the next months.
Given that we like have less control over the data in a sense, right? We might not know what is like what it is referring from and like what it is referring to and where it has its knowledge from, where it was trained off, as Nina just said. Like looking at the future, do you think that we as a collective in certain areas of our work, we will just get slightly dumber in a sense because we just rely too much on it? Or you think we are in chances to lose certain integrities because we're going to not check resources anymore? We're just going to give it for face value what that thing is going to tell us?
100%. 100%. I cannot begin to how true that statement is. Because now you can be a self-proclaimed expert anytime nowadays, right? With like a Twitter bio or whatever. It's going to be so easy to just search something and think you found it. And I've actually fallen under this trap myself. I thought ChatGPT could read links like for live websites. There is now a link reader plugin, but basically I ended up getting a false positive, and only through putting it in Reddit and because there's a Reddit community called ChatGPT where you share prompts. Only through posting it there was I able to be told, hey, this is probably a false positive. But I didn't do my due diligence to check twice on multiple links to make sure this is the case. I just got really excited. I was like, oh my gosh, this worked. I'm going to share it. So you're definitely going to have that. And there was a friend of mine that tweeted recently, it's like experts are still going to exist for whatever field it is. ChatGPT is going to make people feel as though they are, but actually what it will do is help take real experts to another level because they can be so much faster and more powerful in their workflows or in their field. But yes, there is definitely going to be a bunch of people that think they know it because they posted a prompt. Just in the same way, there's probably a bunch of people that watch a YouTube video and like, cool, I got this, I can do this now, or like read a book and like, cool, I'm like, nope. There's a whole journey that you gotta go through. Like, skills are still gonna have to be done by you. The bot isn't going to be able to give you skills to execute. You still do the execution, and so that needs to still be done, and that still takes time. That's not going to change until our brains change. So maybe Neuralink will come in and change that. But no, yeah, there's definitely going to be tons of people that are thinking they're going to be experts. But if you actually use it and hone it more properly, you will still need to refine it. You can create like your own model that's really epic, which we've talked a little bit about. Like, you could refine your model to be really good based on what you need, or you'll just need to refine it generally for whatever like prompt or specific scenario you're going to use it in. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a bunch of one-time enter and oh, I got this.
Yeah.
I got all this.
Actually, I had the same question to all of you. Sorry.
I was going to say, you're talking about this coming from an adult who has experience in education and training behind you. When I look at this, I have an 11-year-old, and what is his education going to be for, right? And I keep thinking, like, the things that I would push people to go into now are like philosophy, because the ability to have critical thinking and make this decision is going to be absolutely crucial in differentiating, are you an expert because you read it here, or can you make your own opinion? So I think how this is going to impact the future generations of children and their education is really.
Yeah, I think also, like, we kind of forget sometimes that creativity is not only something you're born with. I mean, some have more than others, obviously, but it is also something that you can train to a certain level, right? And of course, you can use AI to enhance your creativity. But if you, as a kid, for example, or even as a visual artist, try to rely too heavy on that, I think you'll lose touch a bit of creativity, and you will get into it, of course, but it's some more effort to get on the right track again, I think.
Nina, you had something to add to that take as well?
Actually, the discussion went into another direction. I was really wondering, and I believe we have right people to ask here. Do you think it makes sense for a company to build their own model fed on what they know about their market, their customers, data that is very specific, so they can funnel that further into creating, for instance, design principle, design guidelines, but also as some kind of starting point to work on discovery. So you don't have to always perform user research for everything, but you have quite solid understanding. And also from design ops perspective, you have a systematized knowledge base of who your customer is, what do they want, what do they need, what are the cohorts. So does it make sense, like cost-wise? Is that efficient to create something like this internally? If we compare it to the cost of API calls, if you would use a provider.
I'm gonna take the leap on that just from my perspective, but feel free to follow up. I think that will become a big thing going forward, because what it will initially end up doing is your, like in bigger companies, your wiki and your documentation, your Notion space, all of the written pages that you currently have and the content that needs to be like searched for, looked for, dived into, will be accessible in a completely different way, and that will help onboarding new people, finding their way around the company, and understanding maybe complexer context more quickly will be very easy. I think we still, but obviously that's why we have the panel, what will AI be in the future, right? I think there's still steps and ways to go now. Hosting, cost of deploying such models, the knowledge of like actually training it, making use of it. But I think, yeah, it definitely will have its, like, that will be a thing for companies, 100%.
But that's also like very, sorry, Saki. I think I was going to make a point that he was about people relying more and more on these models. And I also agree with this conviction, because I think the one that Nina just described will exist very soon, right? That it's going to process NPS scores, and it's going to give you what features people want or what's the sentiment about your product. The problem with that is that the more and more people rely on this information, which is, granted, I think that more you're going to make decisions based on this, right? Like the more we're going to be more dependent on this. I think there's with airplanes, I think most of the airplanes are automated, and there's a huge challenge for pilots now, because it rarely actually. So they have a problem now that these pilots don't know how to pilot the planes anymore in manual mode. So when an accident happens, they lose control. So I think that's very similar in that sense, that we might just lose touch of thinking and making sense of this information ourselves.
Yeah. Right. Who was it? Paul Graham, the YC founder, wrote about this, tweeted about this recently, about how he thinks writing is going to move away as a skill, because people will stop doing so and they'll just type in ChatGPT or ask it to write stuff. Yeah, that would be a shame. I don't know if that will happen, but yeah, it's you still need the ability to articulate yourself and express yourself in different. The thing that we were just discussing on the use cases of like what you mentioned there, Nina and Philipp, about wikis and what companies can do if you could like consolidate your market research into this powerful engine. Like that's just one use case. There are so many of those types of use cases that this thing can come up with. And something that I saw recently about the refrigerator analogy for OpenAI, you may have heard about this as well, which is saying the ones that got rich from refrigeration wasn't the inventor of the refrigerator, it was Coca-Cola. And it's like what you do with that underlying thing. And if you think about what refrigeration allows, ice packs, food and beverages come up, but like ice packs, right? You think about all sorts of things that can come out of it, and there's going to be so many examples that will be powered by this. It could be little projects that we build ourselves. It could be bigger projects that companies build in-house. And it might be that thing that everyone has by their side, in the same way that this thing became that thing that everyone has by their side. And it could very much be that next thing. But there's going to be so many use cases that come out of this. And I think the refrigeration example is like a perfect analogy. We can't even fathom right now what that could be. But like, yeah, what are the ice packs going to be? What's the yogurt going to be? There's all sorts of crazy stuff that we'll be able to create. And that's, I'm just thinking about refrigeration from like, think about it from like an industrial perspective.
Well, that's a great analogy.
Just sorry, one comment is because we always imagine that the adoption would be like huge and everyone's gonna work with that, but actually for me this is like where I'm more curious to see how the adoption will be, because we always think on the worst scenarios because we're thinking that everyone is gonna have access to that, but it's not exactly like that, right? Like today we have like all different ages kind of living together. Here, if you compare places, more developed places and less developed places, you're gonna have like different. There is people still using H today, you know. So I feel like we go like for these super spots where everyone is using that and is being changing their lives in somehow, but this curve actually going super slow, more slow than what we think. We see like the peak of the trend, but if you look back, it's not everyone that is using those tools, and so I feel like we still have some time before everything change. But for people who is starting right now and they have this completely different scenario, I wonder if this is a fun scenario or is catastrophic, like we are kind of putting a bit sometimes. So I feel like for home right now can be really challenging to live in, and maybe generate a lot of anxiety. it's also our responsibility to deal and try to balance also like these how we think that this will like change everything for the future. So but I'm more optimistic. I think like we're going to create something that will destroy us. So I believe that we will educate ourselves and understand how to do the best use for that. But I really like what you're saying in this knowledge kind of a brain for the company. This is sounds really interesting and something that we could like leverage a lot of good ideas on that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we should always be looking on the bright side of things than on the worst case scenario. And Beth, if you want to finish your last take on it, Nina, as well, then I would hand over into the Q&As. I think we could talk for hours and days actually about the ins and outs and the different experiences. But yeah, looking a bit at the time. But Beth and Nina, I'm happy to have your last thoughts about that topic here.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had a bit of a question and maybe more for Ricardo, but when we talk about this as internal tools, right? And when we talk about like data analytics, one thing in my career, I've seen people being able to make the numbers work however they want to make them work. You know, oh, we've got data, so we can do what we said we wanted to do. And can you see this changing that to give us really like, you know, this might be one case where removing the human from the equation actually gives you more truth. So it's just something that I was thinking, and I will follow up with that because that's a question I had.
Yeah, I do think that's a really good point. In this experience, so we deploy the SQL query agent. It happens. It works as a Slack bot agent right now. We have a few people using it in a trial company, and what we observe, these queries that it generates are very convincing. And so it actually is hallucinated in a different way. It's still hallucinating, but it's still like tweaking the numbers. But it gives you very convincing answers. And so it generates the query, generates the raw data, and then it analyzes what that means in relation to the question. Sometimes the articulations are really well written, and you read it and you feel like, oh yeah, that's absolutely right. Like we had 10 customers last week that bought this product, but in fact, like there was 0, or there was, it's very easy for these systems to also get it wrong. But I've been watching Code Interpreter, which is also a model that hasn't been released by OpenAI that is quite powerful. I do see that maybe with better evaluation, we will be able to get less bias and in some way. But I think we have risks that we can't just see it now also. But yeah, I think that's a really good point when it comes to human bias, human intelligence versus alien intelligence. When do these two overlap? And I think someone mentioned like brainstorming with AIs sometimes is good because you get ideas that you wouldn't have come up yourself. And I do agree with that. It's just a really strange form of intelligence that, yeah, it's like an alien that you can't really reason with. It's weird, strange, and kind of learning like you did it with a dog in some strange way, right? Like, yeah.
No, very, very, very good part. I think that will be one of the cases, Beth, as you mentioned, that we can really take out the human equation of it and have some more reliable data in that sense as well. I would like to move a bit into the Q&A direction. I know we still could discuss like for ages and ages and ages, but also want to be very mindful of your time. We've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes already. But we have a couple of very interesting questions that I would like to get into the round. Daniel posted one that I found very, very interesting. He said that the question should not be if AI can replace designers, which it certainly can't, and I think you all agreed with that it currently can't do that, but how much more productive will AI get people? And like, will there be less jobs? Will there be like a different demand for a certain job because like a person that was, or a job that has been done by 3 persons now being done by 1 person? What is your take on it? Maybe Josh, you to start off with.
Yeah, I mean, that's of course one question that has been discussed a lot of times, and I think there are a lot of different opinions because we still try to understand the complexity of this thing and how we can use it. But in the end, I think it's a bit similar to the invention of computers as well, right? Like before we had the automated computer that just managed itself. Like there were also people, and a lot of times women, who just like plugged the plugs from plug to plug to actually connect the wires. And when that was automated in a way, of course, these women were not needed anymore, but they could go on and do actually more meaningful things, right? So in that sense, I think it's gonna change for sure. Like no one is gonna argue that, but I think there's also a lot of potential to actually change for the better. And repetitive jobs are not the jobs where people are actually really happy with usually. So if those jobs try to will transform into something that brings them more joy even, or where they can find their personal USP more, that would be some movement I would like to see.
And there is a famous phrase now already overused that says you won't be replaced by AI, but people who use it. And what's true about that is simply that things are moving so fast that we need to move very fast. We need to keep up with all these trends, with the new tools, and start using them basically. So it can be very overwhelming.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to add that the big corporations are here in danger because they are very slow. They are lacking agility. It takes them forever to implement new programs, to approve, to go through all the hierarchy of security, compliance, and so on. So startups here are in a great position, and also freelancers and self-employed people who cannot afford themselves to be replaced. So they will invest their free time to learn these new tools, to maybe create online courses, to create side hustles, and so on. And ultimately, this will all impact our productivity. And yeah, those who are lagging will also keep up at some point. So once we free up, let's say 30 to 40% of our time, we won't work less. We will just do different things. And simply a lot of things will be obsolete, like, drilling cards 6 years ago, or changing the cables and so on. But there will be other kinds of work that need to be done. And of course, work will longer and harder.
It's a very interesting take. So that there will definitely be some improvement in the ability to output more work within a person, but I think it will have a lot of different ways it can go. I think it's yet to find out what will actually happen in the future and how we will rely on that, and also on finding people that have the skill set to use such tools as well, right? Which is also something that then might come into play. I think there's one very interesting question I'd like to bring up now as well. Is like, from your perspective, what are some really successful real world use cases of AI that you find inspiring? Saki, maybe your direction. I mean, you are a very a digital nomad in a sense as well, trying every single tool that is out there. Have you found like any very meaningful real world AI experience outside of using like ChatGPT, Midjourney, and these tools, like where it was really applied in a way that made you go, wow? Or is that something the group or the panel has yet still to discover?
So a tool that actually leverages AI to help you out.
I think
a
that's
new one. I can't think of an immediate one off the top of my head that's like completely new, but like obviously Netflix and Spotify have been doing this for ages, right? With their recommendation engines. They're very good. Like Spotify's Discover Weekly and what Netflix can churn out in like it's recommended for you, all that kind of stuff. I give it a thumbs up when I like a movie, etc., to make it better. But the incumbents almost have been good for a while. But actually, yeah, come to think of it, I can't think of, outside of the tools to help us build tools or build products, I can't think of anything that jumps out that has like a great AI engine. But yeah, I mean, I think stuff will come out of it. Maybe it's just going to be the case that the big ones get even better. But yeah,
I think we
I have a
have some.
very silly. Sorry, Beth.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Now, I have a
I've-
very silly answer for. I really like the videos of Balenciaga on YouTube. I don't know if you saw those videos. They're super funny. It's like a guy who created the images of like movies or other things with the Balenciaga kind of theme, and create like a 1-minute video on YouTube, and it's super funny. This for now, it's like the best use that I can remember. But I would say also Freeletics is using in a super good way. We have a AI to do the coaching of the exercise, to choose the exercise that the person will do from what you are like how you classify the workouts. If it's easy for you, not if you change things. He's like continuously changing the training to make it the best. So I would point these two very different cases.
Cool. Beth?
I was just going to say there are products that we use that we don't even recognize are AI, right? So we have like the plant identifier that Google has. This again, it's looking at patterns and it's finding out and saying, oh, this is your plant and maybe you need to water it. Or, you know, games, like my son just started playing like the latest whatever the maker that did Pokemon Go has a new game out. And one of the things that you do is you point the camera to identify things, and then different things come back. And this is all based on AI, because it says, show me a flower, show me water, show me, you know, different things. And so I think that it's really becoming slowly incorporated in our lives in ways that we don't recognize. And so this is also the part where we have to start looking at how do we also make AI part of this for users as we design.
Perfect. I think that will be like, just thinking on top of my head, like I think most of the use cases will be that the user will just not even recognize that something there is happening and what it's actually utilizing under the hood. There's a, Beth, as you were just speaking, there's a question there directly directed to you that you have. Beth has an amazing background. The person, Priscilla, is interested in your thoughts on how AI will change the product iteration process, and if AI will be able to understand users' pain points and needs, or if that will always be to some degree on like a human and empathetic level that a machine cannot fulfill.
It's interesting. So, I mean, I worked at Netflix, and a big thing at Netflix was even to scrub through films. I was working in the marketing team, and we were using AI to even help the editors creating the trailer to be able to do this in less time, right? So instead of having to go through methodically looking at screens, this would have an engine that would look for like close-ups of different emotions. And I think that we might be able, you know, it always had to have an editor come back and validate, but it gave a starting point. And I think that when we start to use this in our own field of doing user research, right? Maybe we can also have like identifications of emotions or something in faces that trigger us to say, look at this again. But I think we still have to make that human judgment, right? We have to continuously, like the machine will feed us and we have to feed the machine. And so I think that will be that partnership that we have to have. Is there will be things. I don't think without having human interaction, we are going to get the answers, right? So like the AI engines that'll create your personas, this is just creating a bunch of numbers and ideas, and it's fiction, right? I think to really make it human, we can use the machine, but we have to use the machine in front of a human.
yeah, basically AI is not inherently good or bad. It's what we make out of it, how we train it, how we treat it, and what we fed it with, and finally what we approve. Because as you said, Beth, we must supervise the process. We hold the responsibility to design products that create a good impact and not to ruin lives. So there was also a couple of years ago a manifesto on not using dark UX patterns. So I suppose it's time to those principles and put them in a contemporary context.
Awesome. On that note, I think one last question to answer before slowly wrapping it up. There's a question from Sergio, and he's also going into that direction, answering like if you do user research, user interviews purely with AI, do we think that answers will be as random and as like open as real persons, given that AI and a lot that it does is it's trying to recognize pattern? Like can we get this randomized and this like real world examples while doing user research with AI? I think that's a very, very interesting question as well. I leave it open to you guys.
You probably could. Go for it, Beth.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you'll find quite useful research for known solutions. So when you're trying to create like a standard e-com checkout flow, if you're trying to create a standard onboarding flow, yes, you could probably take a persona for someone that is like in a rush and needs to get things done and needs a quote fast, that kind of stuff, like very, very known solutions. If you've got specific context again for your product and the user types that you have aren't necessarily widely available, or the problem you're trying to solve doesn't have lots and lots of known solutions, that's when it's kind of going to come unstuck. Because again, it's the patterns things, right? So when there's lots of solutions and there's tons of e-com checkout flows, probably don't even think about it. You could just copy the best one. But if you've got something a bit more specific, something a bit more granular, you're probably not going to have as much data that it's trained on for that. And so the users it's referencing to might not quite be accurate because it's not your users or there's not so many of them. So yeah, I think for known problems, yeah, it's just like kind of doing product research on a few competitors that do a checkout flow and just being like, yep, I'll take this one, take this basket experience, take this form fill out experience, and then you're good to go. But something more specific for your feature set, if you're like, oh, how do I structure the FAQs to make them explain X, Y, and Z? That's going to be really tough without real people.
And what I was going to say is, what makes us human is making the mistakes and having the aha moments from those mistakes. And so if you have a machine always asking the right question, how are you going to have that surprising moment where you go, this is the information I was trying to find? And I think we've all had that moment where you're asking all of the questions and then you go off in a tangent somewhere else because it's a little bit interesting, and that becomes the part that you hone in on. And I think that again, it's that part that we can't do with AI. We can't ask AI to make a mistake because that could go terribly wrong, right? We just do it by accident.
And I think that's exactly what Priscilla was also trying to get at with her question, right? It's like these mistakes or these different views or these different angles that we as humans have on different things, as we, I think, perfectly this are displayed now in that panel talk, is right, like how we look from different perspectives. This might be something that you could get out of AI, but you need to be very, very good at feeding it with the proper prompts. And then again, like how far can it go and how wrong could it go as well if you force him to take a certain perspective, and will it go that route or not? And I think that is all things that we will find out in the future, and that will now become, I think, more and more evolved the further along we go the road. I think if we would take that panel talk in like half a year time in December this year, I think the world has turned in a 180 or 360 already once again in the whole AI space and how we're utilizing it. But yeah, I will take these words and wrap up the panel discussion and the Q&As slightly. Nina still raised her hand. Please go ahead.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge what Beth said, the beauty of mistakes. Let's acknowledge the fact that one of the most beautiful and impactful discoveries throughout the human histories were created by mistake, such as penicillin. So this is something that we have as humans, and this cannot be replicated. And we also need to embrace the vulnerability and yes, being prone to mistakes, because that's also one of the essence of our existence. Well, we don't have to optimize everything. Not everything needs to be perfect. Sometimes it's perfectly fine to make a mistake and learn something on the way.
I think I couldn't have found any better closing words to that panel that one Nina just did. So thank you very much for that. I think that was a brilliant take on the whole AI topic. In general, I think thank you very much for all your insights. I hope you as the crowd and the people who are watching from everywhere enjoyed it and could take something away of it. We are still all available on our LinkedIn social channels, so you can reach out, I guess, to every single one here in the panel room if you have follow-up questions. Follow them on LinkedIn, and yeah, thanks a lot for joining that panel discussion. Thanks for spending the last 2 hours with us in this exciting new round. Really looking forward to stay connected with you guys and girls throughout the year, and also discuss a couple of more AI topics when they come up. So yeah, if there are any more questions that you want to answer in DMs or whatnot, feel free to stay in here. Otherwise, thank you very much for the time. And to the audience, my lovely co-worker Uma, who actually has organized this whole event and who has basically gathered all these nice speakers. I wanted to give a big round of applause and a big thank you from my side as well. And on top of that, she's currently posting hosting a free giveaway of a Figma conference ticket that is happening in, I think, a couple of weeks' time. So make sure to check that one out, and she will post the link again so you can grab a free ticket and go to the Figma conference. I guess there will be quite a lot of talk about AI and the future of design and like how it will evolve the tools that we use. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope you all will have a pleasant day, and we hear each other in different occasions. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you for hosting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Really nice.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Have a great rest of the day, evening. Also to all our viewers and listeners, thank you very much, and goodbye.